Welcome back to another episode of Common Voices, a podcast presented by Allied Voices for Israel, where every conversation is a chance to bridge divides, inspire action, and uplift stories of courage and unity. I'm your host, Justin Chow, and today I'm incredibly honored and excited to welcome Ashley Waxman Bakshi to the studio today. Ashley was born in Canada and now lives in Israel with her family. She's built an extraordinary platform for herself, initially as a beauty and lifestyle influencer, and now as a passionate advocate standing against antisemitism and misinformation. And beyond her digital influence, she's an entrepreneur, the founder of AWB Makeup, and holds a master's degree in counterterrorism and security. So very impressive resume so far, if I can say. Her voice has also grown even more powerful through her personal connection to the ongoing conflict, and she continues to courageously speak out and inspire action across the globe. Ashley, it's such an honor to have you join us today.
Thank you for me too. And it's kind of funny to hear you say that I have a company called AWB Makeup and then a master's in counterterrorism. Like the two together in the same sentence.
I mean, it is who you are. It is like, you know, your accomplishments and your accolades. So, of course, it's natural to highlight them. It's who you are.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you.
So, you know, let's start kind of getting to know who you are, like just kind of connecting personally. Tell us a bit about your journey of becoming an advocate and that transition from like being a beauty influencer and into like what you're doing right now, essentially.
So I think we need to actually begin with growing up in Canada. And my parents were Israeli who had immigrated to Canada. Yeah. And I was excessively Canadian as a child. I was kind of embarrassed to have immigrant parents. And you know, hearing stories, my brothers are quite a bit older than me, but I had heard stories about them being like beat up on the way home for wearing a kippah on their head. Wow. So I really wanted to just, you know, being the only person in my family who was born in Canada, I really wanted to be Canadian. And being Jewish or Israeli were never really a big part of my identity, or at least I never thought so.
Interesting.
And it was actually when I went to university for the first time, I went to Wilfrid Laurier University.
Okay.
And this was 22 years ago. I actually encountered my first anti-Semitic experience. And I was in complete shock because I didn't think anti-Semitism existed in Canada. And I guess that kind of made me curious to explore that a bit more, which led me to going on the Birthright trip, which for those of you who don't know, every Jewish student is offered to go on a free trip to Israel. Now, I have Israeli parents, so I had been to Israel many, many times. So at first I was like, no, I don't want to. Yeah. But then I found out that the legal drinking age in Israel is 18.
Can't resist that.
So I was like, okay. And on Birthright, basically, I had this like epiphany moment where I realized I met Jews from all over the world, and I realized we were all the same and singing the same songs. And I felt like for the first time in my life, I had found my family, which is like a weird thing to say. But basically, when I came back to university, there was a protest against Israel on my campus. And I was never really an activist or an advocate for Israel. Like I said, I didn't really care, to be honest. But I saw there was misinformation already. They were talking about an apartheid wall, the security barrier that was being built in 2003, 2004. And I went up to one of the students and I said, very naively, why are you talking about the wall without talking about the terrorist attacks and the reason why it's being built? It's being built because there's terrorist attacks. I never could imagine how something that would protect human life could be taken as something bad. And the person starts shouting at me, Nakba, 1948, occupation, genocide, ethnic cleansing, all these words that I'd never heard of in the context of Israel. And I was like, what is that? So I took some of the pamphlets that they were handing out and I went back to my dorm and I started reading them. And I started saying to myself, is this true? Did we do that? You know, did we ethnically cleanse? Oh my God, I never heard about the Nakba. Does it mean that like my whole family is hiding something from me? And so I started having these questions and I called my mom and I said, Mom, why are people saying that we stole Palestinian land? And my mom, who's Israeli, goes in the most Israeli way ever, What you mean stolen land? This God gave us the land. We can't steal the land God gave us. And I'm like, Mom, I don't think that's an actual like legit response to say on a university campus. I think I'm going to buy a book. And I started reading, and I read books that were, you could say, pro-Israel. I read books that were very critical of Israel, including writers like Noam Chomsky, if you guys have heard of him.
Yep, very prominent.
And I thought it was really important because I really had this like moment where I was questioning myself and my own belief and everything I'd been raised on. And I came up with my own conclusions that it's not fair to present one side of the story because there are two sides and there are truths to both sides, but at least both sides need to be heard and people need to be able to make the decision on their own. Absolutely. Of what they believe. And so that's when I decided to start being more active on my campus. That's when I started, I guess you could say, identifying as a Zionist. Yeah. Which I actually don't like the word, to be honest.
Really?
Yes. We can talk about that if you want after.
Yeah, for definitely. Sure.
But that's when I became involved. And then eventually I found myself in Israel. I decided to go to Israel. And
when was that?
I went to Israel in August of 2006 during the Second Lebanon War. So just as after October 7th and this current war, a lot of Jewish people in the diaspora started to feel like the sense of belonging. And, you know, many of them did make aliyah, moving to Israel. I felt that in the Second Lebanon War. I also think that the noise that I was seeing on my university campus, by then I had already transferred to York, but I did see a lot of noise on the campus that was anti-Israel. I was worried about the future for Jewish people in Canada, and this is in 2006. People are surprised, right?
I don't blame you. It's been what, like that's 18 years?
18 years, yeah. I saw the seeds that were planted on university campuses that allowed for the fruits of the what we saw after October 7th. I saw it. There was a student, if I could mention, there was a student at York who was, I'm assuming Muslim, I'm not sure. He was of Arab descent. And we knew each other by name, and his name was Ahmed, and we used to, you know, argue and shout at each other in rallies. But at the end of the day, we'd be like, you want to go out for a smoke together? You know what I mean? Like,
ooh, yeah.
That's what it was like back in the day. We could argue, and then we'd be friends or we'd go to class or whatever. So one day after one of these very heated rallies, protests, whatever you want to call it, we went outside together and we were standing outside and I said to him, Ahmed, I have a question. Like, why do I always see you here protesting against Israel? Don't you ever go to class? And he was very, like, I didn't get it at the time, but he was like, no, I don't. And he's like, I've been here for 5 years. And I'm like, don't you want to graduate? And he was like, I don't really care. And then I didn't understand at the time. When I found out after, because after I'd already moved to Israel, I came back to Canada and spoke to other people who were now studying at York. I found out he was still there on campus doing it years later.
Wow.
And that's when I put two and two together, that somebody was paying his tuition to just be there and do it. And that's when I understood that there's something bigger happening on our campuses than just students who are misinformed or whatever.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
What a journey.
Yeah.
So.
And then I come to Israel.
Yeah.
I get a master's degree in counterterrorism.
Incredible.
My dream is to be like a diplomat. I start working in the Ministry of Defense. What I did there was I was basically a government facilitator for defense industries cooperation between North America and Israel. So one of the famous projects that I've worked on was like Iron Dome. So that was
no way.
Yeah.
You worked on the Iron Dome.
Yeah, I came towards the end, but basically it's a project that was done with American industries and Israeli. I also did a few top secret projects with the Canadian government. And so that was very exciting. But while I was there, I, for fun, uploaded some makeup tutorials to YouTube.
I see.
Just for fun.
So that's how it started.
Yeah, I mean, I'd worked as a makeup artist here in university and stuff, and I always liked it, but I never thought I could make a career out of it. And when that took off, I was like, okay, this is more fun. I think I could make good money being an influencer. This was in 2012. So I already kind of saw that in America, influencers were working with brands and things like that. So I left the job and became a full-time YouTuber. And I ended up becoming Israel's biggest YouTuber and vlogger. Wow. And yeah, and then I started like hosting TV shows and started my own brand. And then in May 2021, I have to say I did kind of always feel like I had betrayed my country and my mission for kind of abandoning it and knowing what was happening on campuses, knowing that it was already starting to come into social media. And I was in my own world with lipstick. So I kind of felt bad about that. And in 2021, Operation Guardian of the Walls, we saw for the first, at least I saw for the first time, people in my industry, so models, beauty influencers, singers, people from like the arts and entertainment industry were using their platforms to not advocate for the Palestinian cause, because that I had always seen and that I have no problem with. They were spreading lies about Israel.
Straight up lies.
Straight up lies. I can give one example. It's famous. Many people know this example, but Bella Hadid put up a picture of apparently the Palestinian national football team, but it was actually a Jewish team with the Star of David on their shirt. And that really bothered me. Like, that's not only offensive to us, that's offensive to the Palestinians.
Don't blame you, not at all. Yes.
And so that's when I decided that I was going to use my platform, switch it to English, because it was all in Hebrew up until then, and start calling out people who were telling lies about Israel and advocating for truth and for peace. And I think that's what a lot of people don't understand is that from my perspective, at least, when I advocate for Israel, I advocate for peace with Israel. It's not that I'm advocating against another group of people. I think we should be speaking in terms of, calming the hate and how do we bring solution to this conflict? How do we bring people closer together?
Yeah, I think that's a very common misunderstanding these days, especially for people, Canadians, I would say, who are unfamiliar with the conflict, have had very little interactions with Jews, Israelis, anyone from the Middle East, and they see what's going on and they think that, it's a one side or this side kind of issue, that there's no moving forward without getting rid of one or the other. And they think that that is what people are advocating for. If you're on this side, if you denote yourself as Jewish, or you're Israeli, or you support this movement in any way possible, that means you're anti the other side.
Absolutely. And it couldn't be further from the truth, at least from my perspective. I can't speak in terms of everyone, but for me, I care about all human life. And I think, again, like you said, a lot of people think that if I'm advocating for Israel, it means I don't care about Palestinian life. That's not true. I care about all life. I just try to bring awareness, especially now post-October 7th, that Hamas in power of Gaza is not good for Palestinian life. Not only for Israeli life, but for Palestinian life as well. And people who are true advocates for the Palestinian people should be protesting against Hamas, which unfortunately, that's not what we've seen. Especially across Canada, we've seen people not with a Palestinian flag, with a Hamas flag, with a Hezbollah flag, with flags of terrorist organizations. Could you imagine if after 9/11, people were on the streets with the Al-Qaeda flag? It's the same thing. A lot of people, I think, just don't understand that.
It's the same, exactly. It's the same concept of like people thinking that like they see a crappy situation. Rightfully so, they feel upset. Rightfully so, they worry about the families, the kids. It's wartime. It's sad. They're suffering on both sides, every side involved. But that is precisely also when people get narrow-minded and their perspective also narrows and they lose sight of this kind of future, this possibility where everyone can still coexist with each other. It's not about the people themselves. It's people in power who are controlling, terrorist regimes, like billionaires who hide in Qatar and, control what's going on, like in Gaza and Israel, with their billions of dollars. Foreign regimes,
Absolutely.
That kind of thing. So, yeah, I wish more people understood that.
Israel is the proof that Jews and Muslims can coexist because we do in Israel. We do. And like you said, foreign regimes, at the end of the day, the ones pumping out the narrative that is now being, said on Canadian streets it's not even the Palestinians themselves.
Mm-hmm.
It's the narrative coming out of the Iranian regime. There's a lot of Soviet propaganda mixed into that.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, Qatari propaganda, which, and then we have TikTok, for example, and the algorithms that are working in a certain way that we know, China, there's a reason for that as well. It's not only anti-Israel, it's very anti-West. And so there's much bigger geopolitical issues here.
Absolutely.
And I think that's where the world has been very confused since October 7th.
But for you, speaking as someone born in Canada, but then eventually moved to Israel, and you're now based in Israel, how do you see that difference? Like, people hear that perceive of people butting heads against each other, not being able to coexist, versus when you were actually there and you saw what was actually happening on the ground and people working together. And tell us a bit more about that.
So I can say, and this is something that you learn with time, when I came to Israel at the beginning as a Canadian, I didn't understand, and you could say it was like borderline fear, I guess, at the beginning of, you get in a taxi in Israel or you get on a bus and the driver is of Arab descent. He's a Muslim Israeli. And at the beginning you're like, whoa, hold on, wait, should I be scared? Should I be nervous? I know, because it's a country of terrorism. And I used to feel really bad also. Does this mean I'm a racist if I'm thinking these things? And so I used to get really angry at myself about it. In time, I've realized, and especially after October 7th, I think October 7th was such proof to me how loyal the Muslim Arab population in Israel is, because we didn't hear like anything, any uprising, any violence, nothing post October 7th from them. In fact, it's the complete opposite. Surveys have showed that Israeli Arabs prior to October 7th, identified more, I don't remember the exact statistic, but they identified more as Arab or Palestinian before they identified as Israeli. And since October 7th, it's switched. Because,
the opposite.
Yes,
Wow.
I don't remember exact percentages of how it changed, but they saw what Hamas did on October 7th, firstly understood that it's completely against the teachings of Islam, and they understood what it would mean if, God forbid, Hamas succeeded and took over Israel, what it would mean for them to live under the Hamas regime. They don't want that. And so they became even more loyal to the state of Israel. And I think that's something that Canadians don't understand. And unless you visited Israel, people always ask me, like, what's the best way to really understand the conflict? I'm like, if you have a Canadian passport, it is so simple. Come to Israel, visit. You can actually go to Judea and Samaria, where I cannot go, to many areas, Area A, which is called, so that's under Palestinian Authority control. On a Canadian passport, you can go there, see for yourself what happens on both sides, speak to people, ask them on both sides, what is your wish for the future? Do you want peace with the other side? And people will see for themselves that if they ask Israelis, probably 9 out of 10, if not 10 out of 10, will say, I want peace with my Palestinian neighbors. But if you go through the streets of Jenin, Ramallah, and Bethlehem, and you ask them, do you want peace or a two-state solution or even a one-state solution with the Jews, they're going to say, no, we want the Jews out. And I think that paints the picture of the conflict. And that's why we have been so unsuccessful in resolving this conflict for so many years, because one side is willing to negotiate, come to the table, even if we haven't made an agreement. There have been agreements offered, but assuming there weren't even agreements offered, we're willing to come to the table. They weren't even willing to come to the table many, many times. Many people don't know this, but the Palestinians have been offered to have their own independent state. I think it's 6 or 7 times. Yeah, multiple. And they've always rejected it because it's not about having a Palestinian state. In fact, the Jewish state wants a Palestinian state more than the Palestinian leadership does. The Palestinian leadership just wants there to not be a Jewish state.
Precisely, yeah. And I think you're right. Like, people don't understand that difference. And, well, first of all, the fact that Israeli Arabs want peace, that you yourself have even said, like from statistics, it shows that they, you know, they identify themselves as like Israeli first than anything, and that they, you know, they support coexistence. They want to exist peacefully. Peace is their objective. And then there are people that don't want that. And I think people misunderstand when they see the world, and when they see especially like a geographical context or geopolitical context that's different from like Canada, America, where people think it's like it's white, black, binary, or anything white or anything that's not white. In the Middle East, it is a lot more complicated than that. And there are people of all different colors, of all different backgrounds, of all different political affiliations. And you can't project your Western lens onto something that just doesn't fit.
Absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, the best example of that is if you look at the Druze community in Syria right now, which I think probably most Canadians don't even know what Druze means. I didn't fully know what a Druze was until I moved to Israel.
Yeah.
You know, and so for those of you who don't know, Druze is its own religious minority. It's kind of a sect that like an offshoot of Islam from many years ago. But they're kind of their own ethnic group. They have their own flag, and they pledge allegiance to whatever country they are in. They don't have any national aspiration to have their own state, but it's in their religion to be loyal to whatever country they live in. So the Druze community in Israel has always been very patriotic. They disproportionately serve in combat units in the army. I think they also disproportionately, unfortunately, get killed in combat because they do go to those positions. And they're very loyal, and they're very, very good people. But in Syria, there is a very big Druze population. And you see now with the change of government in Syria, they are not loyal to Syria. They actually want, because they see how the Druze are protected under the Israeli government, they've reached out to the Israeli government, and they want the Israeli government to protect them in Syria. I mean, if that is just one aspect of this conflict that no one's even talking about. Like, our conflict is not Israelis versus Palestinians. It is so much more complex. We have the Druze, we have Christians, we have Arabs, we have the Iranians, we have the Egyptians, we have the Jordanians, we have Erdogan in Turkey,
Qataris, Saudis.
It's crazy. And so to try to, like you said, like the nuance, to try to take this multifaceted, complex conflict and narrow it into it's Israel versus Palestine. I'm sorry, but that's ignorance.
It is. It's not a soccer game. It's not like you're not cheering for one team or like another. Yeah. It's the world where people live in are more complicated than who's right and who's wrong, or who's on this side or who's, And I think that's one thing that, like, if I could address like the general Canadian populace or even American these days, to be honest, because you know that extremism and what's the word I'm looking for? Like polarization. It's so common and so prevalent. It's because we don't have that common understanding in place. We don't have that. I feel like we don't have a tolerance. We've lost a kind of like tolerance for disagreements or opposing viewpoints, and acknowledging that it's not the end of the world. You can still coexist peacefully and come together and work together. You don't have to kill. That's not a prerequisite for existing happily, you know? So yeah, I really want, and I think that's also a question to you, like how would you describe the like modern day in Canada, like this divide between people who support Israel, people who support Palestine? And there's like, it seems like there's a clear like, political divide. Like if you're on the right, then you support Israel. If you're on the left, then they're supporting Palestine. What would you tell Canadians, you know, like who are caught in the midst of all this, and you yourself as a Canadian, like what insights do you think you can offer them?
So firstly, I do want to say that this disease of polarization has affected the entire modern democratic world. We suffer from it in Israel as well. Obviously, social media has a lot to do with it.
Yeah.
But what I would say is, my answer is actually in your question, because in your question, the way you phrased it, you said, and I know this was unintentional, so I'm not like calling you out, but you said Israel versus Palestine. And I think that even that is already one of the problems, because it's not Israel versus Palestine, because Israel is Palestine. Israel and Palestine are the same thing. These are just words. These are just words. At the end of the day, we are talking about the same area, the same land. It doesn't matter if I call it Judea and Samaria or the West Bank, right? This is just the language we use, which tends to have a certain political connotation.
Yeah.
I would ask Canadians to remove those words and speak about peace versus terror. That's the war right now. What side are you on? Are you on a side of peace, or are you on a side of terror? Because it is very possible to support both groups of people simultaneously, and I think that's what Canadians should do. They should support all people. But you have to look, in order to support all people, you have to see who is the side that continues to refuse peace, why are they refusing peace, and what types of actions are they justifying? And so when we go back to talking about October 7th, I know many people who define themselves as anti-Zionist, anti-Israel. They will say, well, it didn't start on October 7th. I've heard that so many times.
Many times.
It's true. It didn't start on October 7th, just like it didn't start in 1967, and it also didn't start in 1948. The so-called Nakba, the catastrophe that they talk about. Their catastrophe is not the fact that there are refugees from the Israeli-Arab War of 1947-1948. Their catastrophe is the fact that the State of Israel was established.
That exists in the first place.
Exactly. But if we go even from before that, people don't know this, but in 1929, for example, or even as far back as the 1800s, I could go back literally 1,400 years, but let's go to 1929. In 1929, there was no State of Israel. There was a British mandate for the area known as Palestine. The Arabs did not rule there. The Jews did not rule there. And yet there was the Hebron massacre. Hebron is a community in Judea that has been consecutively Jewish for over 2,000 years. And one day, the Arab civilians, again, not ruled, the area was not ruled, this wasn't militias, civilians went in and massacred 69 people, raped women, burned the children alive. Very similar to the actions of October 7th. And that's why when people say, yeah, it didn't start October 7th, that's right, it didn't start October 7th, but this is behavior that has been
repeated,
exactly, over many, many years. It has nothing to do with any of the excuses they give. A lot of the people say, but it's occupied, but Gaza is occupied. That's why. So they have a right to resist. Well, Gaza is not occupied because in 2005, Israel removed people, civilians, soldiers, and corpses, literally dug up the graves. Well, people say, yeah, but the West Bank is occupied. Okay, but prior to 1967, the West Bank was not occupied. In fact, it was occupied by Jordan. And there were still terrorist attacks done on Israelis by, what we call today Palestinians. In the 1960s, they didn't call themselves Palestinians. They were Arabs. So if it's about an occupation of the West Bank, why did we have terrorist attacks before Israel controlled the West Bank? And so this is proof that it's not, they're just trying to justify the barbaric actions. I'm sorry, but targeting civilian communities is barbaric. It is a barbaric action.
I think we can all agree on that.
Yes, it is. Unfortunately, we can't all agree on that. Unfortunately, the two people sitting in the room agree on that, but not everyone. When I hear people, I see on social media, people screaming on the streets of Montreal and Toronto and Vancouver, we are all Hamas. Hamas was justified. That is never justified. Even if there's a plight of the people and they, and they want freedom, they want a state, you do not target civilian communities. You have weapons, use them against an army. Use them against an army. Why go and attack babies and kidnap people? Why? And if you are attacking an army, there are rules of engagement. You're allowed to take prisoners of war. You're not allowed to take people and not allow them access to the Red Cross. You're not allowed to beat them. You're not allowed to starve them. There's rules.
Human shields.
Exactly. There's rules of engagement. And so you can't have it both ways. You can't say, no, we're the poor Palestinian people, so we're going to, slaughter people and it's going to be justified. And also we're going to fight against an army, but we're the poor Palestinian people, so we're not going to fight according to international law. And then hold Israel, accountable and take them to ICC and ICJ when Israel is doing everything according to international law, but you're using Iranian, Qatari, Soviet propaganda to use modern Western democratic values against a Western modern democratic state so that it cannot defend itself. And that's what they're doing.
It really is. It really is. And also using Jews around the world as, holding them accountable for actions that they have nothing to do with.
Yeah.
And me as someone who's not Jewish, I even going into the space and doing advocacy work, I can feel that kind of blame, that pressure of you call yourself as part of this people, of being Jewish, of being, that your ancestral homeland is in Israel. So, of course, people naturally may think that, oh, then you must have some kind of connection to what's going on right now. I'm going to blame you for it. I'm going to target your synagogue. I'm going to target your school, whatever it is. It's justified because you have a connection somehow. I feel like that's what a lot of misinformed people, not just Canadians, people think. And I think we talked briefly yesterday, and you noted that the average Canadian tends to be sympathetic towards the Palestinian narrative. And you were touching on the whole role of Qatari and Iranian regimes coming in and feeding the propaganda machine kind of thing. But let's talk a bit about that. Why do you think this perspective resonates so strongly with so many Canadians?
Well, first of all, I have to say that I understand because I was there too. In, like I said, on my campus. It took me a second. When I only heard one side of the story, I was like, hold on, wait, that's awful.
Yeah.
So first and foremost, it's very easy. Canadians are good people. Really, we are. I'm so proud to be Canadian. We really are good people. We were raised on such good values to have empathy for people who are weak, for people who are strong, for everyone. And so when you hear that somebody is suffering, first of all, our heart goes out to them. And I can say that even as an Israeli, even as somebody who my cousin was held hostage and my husband's cousin was murdered at the Nova Festival, and I've lost family members in the war, I am still sympathetic, especially to the children of Gaza, especially because children, no matter what, are innocent. And so I understand when we hear one side of a story, of course we're going to be sympathetic to one side of the narrative. But the truth is, and this is what Canadians need to understand, is the truth is you have to put the blame where it needs to be. And of course, at the end of the day, it's the Israeli Air Force that drops bombs on Gaza that does kill innocent people. But you have to go to the cause. Why is this happening? First and foremost, Israel, does everything in its power to minimize it. Leaflets and humanitarian corridors. But why doesn't Egypt allow for innocent Palestinians to cross the border and be safe? That's what Israel would like very much. Not because we want to ethnically cleanse Gaza. No. If we wanted to ethnically cleanse Gaza, we could have done it. Let's be honest. We could have done it many, many years ago. We wouldn't have left in 2005 if that's what we wanted. Yeah. So just like in the Ukraine war, Poland opened its borders and allowed for people to come and be safe. Why are their Arab cousins, not doing that? In fact, I'm not sure if you know this, but the most popular last name in Gaza is Al-Masri, which means Egyptian, the Egyptian in Arabic.
Interesting. I didn't know that.
Because Egypt was Gaza was Egyptian territory.
Yeah.
And so Egyptians moved into Gaza, years ago, 40, 50 years ago. And over for 50 years ago. But where was I going? I've just touched on so many things. But back to Canadians.
Yeah.
Canadians need to put the blame where it needs to be put. Yeah. they need to understand that Hamas was the one who attacked on October 7th, knowing very well that Israel would retaliate. Secondly, has, I think it was over 500 kilometers of tunnel infrastructure in Gaza, did not allow one civilian to come in to keep them safe, steals its humanitarian aid. It just makes no sense. If you want to create a Palestinian state and you're the leadership of Gaza, how does it get you closer to making a Palestinian state by 20 years sending rockets at Israeli communities?
Yeah.
Or maybe coming to a negotiation table? I mean, if they were my government, that's what I would want. I would want for them to create a state for me, to negotiate terms where there was no blockade on our seas or whatever. That's not going to happen by shooting rockets or taking our people hostage. In fact, it's only going to make the situation worse for the Palestinian people. So Canadians who want a better future for the Palestinian people should do everything in their power to condemn these actions and to push for peace talks. I mean, it's not so complicated.
So simple, but it's so yeah. You can, like, the more you outline, like, kind of even like historically what has happened, I can see, like, through action what the intention is, through what they're doing, what they actually believe or what they actually think. People might say that they're just defending themselves, whatever, but why have they rejected opportunities for peace so many times? Why do they need to defend themselves when there's already peace that is possible? Why? What's the reason? And so it has to be more complicated than what people are feeling and thinking. And I'm glad you touched on the notion of, Canadians being in my view as well, like, a very kind and caring people, that obviously we have a very large immigrant population. I myself am an immigrant. And I can see the welcoming spirit and the just non-judgmental, like, oh, you're not like us, we won't welcome you. Like, there's so many, all kinds of varieties of communities that have thrived in Canada, Toronto especially. My gosh.
And I think it's pretty amazing to say. It's amazing here in Toronto to see the Iranian community and the Jewish community are, like, so intertwined, good best friends, right? And it's like, for me, it's like, here is proof of why this whole war against Iran is so stupid. Let's be friends. If we're friends everywhere in the world except for Israel and the Islamic regime, I just, as a woman, as a mother, I just find it so stupid. Like, the whole concept of war, it's so stupid. Like, why should we sacrifice people? Why do I need to send my son? In Israel, we have mandatory conscription. Why am I going to have to send my son to fight? I don't want to. I don't want that. It sounds very hippy-dippy, but, like, I just wish people understood that war is not the solution. Like,
I hear you. I hear you. Yes. Like, that's, again, like we said, it seems like it's such a simple thing that everyone can agree on. But so many actors, regimes, are trying to make it complicated than it seems. There's, the conflict is complicated. The nature of it is complicated. The history, culture, all of it involved, it is complicated. But the agreement that violence should never take precedence over cooperation, understanding, empathy, basic human values that allow us to communicate, cooperate, even with our differences, because of our differences, that we can still come together, that is missing. And that's what people, I think, need to focus more on.
And I think sticking to facts is really important, and educating ourselves. Because I think what a lot of people don't understand is that the only time that the Palestinians as a group of people have ever had any kind of self-determination, self-rule was actually given to them by the Israelis.
Mm-hmm.
And I think people don't understand that because people believe that there was a Palestinian state. I mean, it's very simple. If anybody tells you that there was a Palestine and Israel came and stole it, just ask them basic questions. Where were its borders? What was its capital? Who was its president? Like, there, it doesn't exist. Who was the ruler? Who was the king? Nothing.
Mm-hmm.
But the lie that Israel is stealing more and more land from the Palestinians, it's a lie, because the only time Palestinians have ever had any self-rule or self-governance is because the Israelis gave it to them. We can look at the West Bank, Judea and Samaria. Under the Oslo Accords, the Palestinian Authority was established, and all of Area A is completely self-governed, self-ruled by the Palestinians in sort of some cooperation, actually, with Israel. Because it's the Palestinian Authority is an opposing party to Hamas. Not that they're great. Not that they're great at all. They still pay terrorists the more Jews they kill, but there is some sort of cooperation there. Yeah. And then if we look at Gaza, Gaza was never, ever ruled by an independent Palestinian, entity. In 2005, when Israel left, it allowed for Hamas, for elections, which Hamas took over. Whether it was legit or not, we don't know, because they threw all their opposition off the roof. And they're now on their like 20th year of the 4-year term. But that is the only time that Palestinians actually had any self-rule, self-governance, self-determination, and proof of what that gave. What did that give? What did that give? Not only Israel, what did that give the Palestinians? It gave them Sharia law. They actually have laws that in Gaza that a husband is allowed to rape his wife. That's not a Canadian value, for sure.
No, not
hear,
at all.
Women, especially, the progressive university students, I call them the purple-haired girls. No offense to anyone who has purple hair. I think it's awesome. But to hear them, who are clearly very supportive of LGBT causes, of women's rights, to hear them support Hamas, it's the biggest oxymoron that I've ever heard in my life, because they throw homosexuals off the roof. They, like I said, the law indicates that a husband is allowed to rape his wife. They literally honor killings for women who, whatever. How can you support them being rulers of Gaza? Not for Israel, not because you love Israel. Don't love Israel. How can you sleep at night saying you support them for what they do to the Palestinian people, to the so-called innocent people that you care so much about? They've been doing that for 20 years. 20 years. They've been killing them in the streets. Nobody talks about the fact that hundreds of thousands of Palestinians left Gaza before October 7th, fled, not because of Israel, but because of Hamas, because they wanted to be opposition to Hamas. There was the We Want to Live protests. I think many people haven't heard of that. These were protests happening in Gaza, not against Israeli occupation. This was against Hamas, and Hamas would throw them off rooftops, imprison them, do everything that an awful oppressive regime would do. Yeah. And these people fled to Europe. I'm sure some of them have fled to Canada. And again, these people might not be the biggest activists for supporting Israel, but at least we should, if we really care about the Palestinian people, we should be listening to what they have to say about Hamas.
Absolutely. Like, listen to the people themselves who've been there, who live those lives, who have seen the violence, who have had relatives or family, friends, like, impacted, killed, God forbid. But, like, that's the reality. And people need to realize that is the reality. They need to get out of their heads. They need to get out of their moral superiority and get out of their justified ignorance and understand that, like, you can take a step back. You're allowed to care. You're allowed to care, but you have to realize that at some point, the actions that you're taking because of how much you care are actually harming the people you're trying to help.
And I think the best proof for that is, do you know where there were not protests on the street crying about genocide of Palestine or whatever. Do you know where?
Where?
Not in the Middle East. Not in Egypt, not in Jordan, not in Syria, not in Lebanon.
Mm-hmm.
We saw it only in Western democratic countries.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that is proof, because the Arab world knows very well what
Mm-hmm.
is Hamas, what is the Muslim Brotherhood, what is radical extremist Islam, the oppression that it has on its own people. And countries have fought from within. Egypt has fought from within to fight against the Muslim Brotherhood, where
Yeah.
it's illegal in Egypt.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Right? Jordan, the monarch is very afraid of radicalism. And these are countries, and I mean, of course, the UAE and Bahrain, and countries that have signed the Abraham Accords, Morocco.
North Africa. Yeah, I was just about to say.
So we don't see that there,
Mm-hmm.
but yet we see it in Toronto. I mean, that's
Montreal.
right. That's like a little bit of a red flag.
Yeah. 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 For sure. For sure. So, with that said, how do you think Canadians, whether Jewish or not Jewish, what can they do to address this almost like infection that's trying to seep in to our democracy, our values, to take advantage of our values, take advantage of our willingness to welcome people who are different from us, to understand them, to help them? What do you think they can do to counter these bad actors, this misinformation, within their own communities, institutions, university?
I think first of all,
Mm-hmm.
Canadians should demand that, first of all, anyone who is Canadian
Yeah.
and in Canada,
Yeah.
whether they're here, as a student on a student visa, or if they're a Canadian citizen, you treat Canada with respect, first and foremost.
Mm-hmm.
If you were born in Canada, it doesn't matter. You treat Canada with respect and Canadian institutions. That is first and foremost. Anyone who's not respecting Canada, already a problem for me. And to see the vandalism, the what they've done on campuses. And again, Canada, if we look in comparison to some of the campuses in the US, I think Canada has almost been it's been better here. Some things have been better. But I think in terms of the violence, we've seen school shootings and things like that.
Yeah.
But first of all, demand that Canadians respect Canada. And I think that if you look at whenever you see the pro-Israel rallies, you always see the people there with Canada flags together with Israeli flags, because we support Israel, but first and foremost, we're Canadian and we respect Canada. You don't see that at the other side of the protests, that's for sure. You hear the things that they're saying. I think also Canadians should really educate themselves. And I always say there's certain people we're never going to convince. So don't try. It's a waste of breath. It's a waste of energy. But the people that are willing to listen, for me, a win is not necessarily having them come out of the conversation being like, that's it, I'm a Zionist, I support Israel. No. If I can get somebody to, in their own head, think, I didn't know that. Maybe I don't know everything. That's a win for me. And so I think average Canadians who want to get people to be a little bit more calm, or to maybe think, hey, maybe I don't know everything about this conflict that's a million miles away from here and I've never been there.
Yeah.
Ask them a question. Did you know that, for example, prior to 1967, when Israel did not occupy the West Bank, there were terrorist attacks against Jews? Did you know that? Have you heard that? Get the person to say, oh, I didn't know that. Oh, maybe I don't know everything. So I see that as a big win. And the reason I do want to add, because I touched on it before, about the word Zionism.
Yes.
So I don't love the word Zionism, because Zionism, not because the other side, will say, has like hijacked the term, right? Not because of that, because I would never give them a win. But because I think the term is like no longer relevant, because the term for thousands of years meant the Jewish people want to return to their homeland. That's it. It didn't even talk about like sovereignty. It didn't talk about building a temple. It literally just said, we want to return, right? There's that famous song, By the Rivers of Babylon, where we wept when we remembered Zion. That's from literally like 2,000 years ago. So we returned. We do have sovereignty. And I don't need to justify it anymore. I feel like sometimes when I continue to like identify as a Zionist and not just an Israeli, because that's what I am now.
Yeah.
I'm going back to their narrative, because their narrative is 75 years ago, there was an Nakba, we were displaced, blah, blah, blah. This was against the Zionists who came, right? Who came 75 years ago, 100
From
years
elsewhere.
ago. Right. So I don't need to go back and continue justifying what happened 100 years ago. Firstly, it was justified. The world recognized that the Jewish people, their homeland is there. It has nothing to do with the Holocaust, by the way. It goes from way before the Holocaust. But the United Nations voted. They had an opportunity to create a state then. At the same day, we could have been celebrating Independence Day simultaneously for a Palestinian state and an Israeli state. I just don't think I need to go back and continue justifying if I even have a right to be there. It's done. It's done. We have a state. It's literally like saying, does Pakistan have a right to exist? It was established in 1948 after the British left. Does it have a right to exist? Nobody's asking if Pakistan has a right to exist. So why do I need to justify an ideology of my right to be in my ancestral homeland?
That's a very, very interesting perspective. I can see like where you're coming from, like this has been an aspiration of the Jewish people for so long, thousands of years. It has been successful. Like I've mentioned in a previous episode as well, that like Zionism and the Jewish people's return to their homeland and the establishment of the state of Israel is like one of the most successful land back movements in the entire world. And I think that's something that people should celebrate. And be proud of their heritage, be proud of what's already been achieved, what's already been accomplished. And so for you yourself, do you feel like you would identify more with the like Israeli, I'm
Israeli. And to be honest, I think every Jew in the world is Israeli. Because at the end of the day, like what the word Jewish, right, comes from Judea. Judea's modern word is Israel. Like it's the ancient word of our people, right? Jacob was Israel, and that's why we are the children of Israel. Today's modern state is called Israel. I don't care if you hold a passport or not. If you're Jewish, you're Israeli, in my opinion. Like, we're one family. It doesn't matter. We're one ethnic group. It's just like the Chinese are an ethnic group. Their country is called China. It's like I see it as the same thing, right?
Yeah, so. Totally. Okay, this was a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for coming on to our podcast.
Thank you. And thank you for being an ally, because I was telling you that I'm so surprised being Israeli and being on social media and seeing really so much hate. Like, all we see on social media is hate, unfortunately. We don't see love, right? It doesn't get platformed by the algorithm. To come here and the first thing I asked you was, like, we have allies? Like, because I think a lot of us in Israel, like, we don't think we have allies in the West.
I understand that. No, I really do. Because for me, I won't dive too deep into this, because I can go on and on about, like, my journey of how I started. But for me, I didn't really see it as, like, I'm not Jewish. Should I help? Should I say something? It's not really my place. I just saw it as, these people are grieving. They have families that are severely impacted by what's going on. I'm following what's going on, like, live, following October 7th. I saw it as, these people are going through conflict, war. They're scared. They're grieving. They're frustrated that their own friends are betraying them and not only not reaching out and, offering support, but advocating for the exact opposite of what they want. Advocating for more killing, more violence against their friends, their families. So I really wanted to step in and be like, no, I'm drawing the line. Their voices do not represent mine. I want to say something. I want to find people like me who want to say something. And I want to let both Jews and non-Jews, the entire world, know that you don't have to be Jewish to care about what's going on. You don't have to be Palestinian to care about what's going on. Like you said, there's what people should care about isn't necessarily which side is correct or which side is wrong, but just care about the fact that these are human beings who both have a very strong connection to the land, to this land, and that violence is horrible. What's happening is horrible. But at the very least, you can support the fact that they both deserve to coexist in peace in a land where they can share, where they can prosper, thrive together. I think that's a baseline that people, if they haven't reached it yet, they should really reach. And that's my baseline, for why I'm doing this work. It's like not because I'm this or that, but because it's like, come on, I would just want to support people who are going through a lot, and I'm trying my best to do what I can.
That makes me so emotional to hear. Really. Thank you.
Of course. Yeah. It's I've told people this again and again, like it's just such an honor and pleasure for me to see people being touched by, some of the statements I make, like words and speeches I give and things like that. I really do. Like I'm so touched by everyone's gratitude. But to the Jewish community, I would say you deserve more. Demand more from your non-Jewish friends, non-Jewish communities. They should care. You deserve to be listened to, supported. You deserve to have your narrative respected. You deserve to be respected. And yeah, I really, because, a lot of the times I do speaking engagements and things like that. People, rightfully so, come up to me and they're like very emotional and they are very grateful for everything that I'm saying. But I'm also like, a part of me wants to say, this is the bare minimum of what I want to see happen for this community. It's such a beautiful community that deserves peace, prosperity, everything, to coexist, all these things. And Canadians, non-Jewish Canadians, that should be the conclusion that we're reaching. Not one side or the other, but just leave them alone. let them do their thing. Let them have their peace.
Yes.
Everyone.
Thank you.
On both sides.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you very much again,
Thank you.
Ashley. Feel free to plug any current projects or social media handles that you want to, our listeners to know. Anything you want. Yeah.
So I will say, first of all, they can follow me on Instagram, of course. So it's Ashley Waxman Bakshi, Bakshi. And it's the one with the V verified, because there's so many fan pages from way back when. So make sure you're following the right one.
I love that.
But also, I would just want to let people know that I'm writing a book. So I don't know when it will be ready.
Very exciting.
And I'm going to do it. I'm doing it in cooperation with End Jew Hatred Canada. And the book is basically a simple guide to the most unsimple place in the world. And so it's going to be I wanted to write one book that's not like a certain aspect of the conflict, but just has everything in it. Yeah. Literally everything. So somebody could just read this book and be like, I get it. I understand what Jews are. I understand what their history is. I understand what their connection to Israel is. I understand what Zionism was. I understand how they established. It's all in one book. So follow me and keep a lookout for when it does come out. And I would love everyone's support.
That sounds so exciting. I can't wait to read it. I'd love to read it.
Thank you.
Okay. To everyone listening, thank you so much for spending your time with us on Common Voices today. We hope this conversation sparked something meaningful, some inspiration for you, maybe gave you some clarity or ideas that you can put into action right away with your friends, your families, communities that you're in, especially as Canadians, because we all have a responsibility to, not only be welcoming to those who are different from us, but to also, stand for the values that make us who we are. Peace, coexistence, respect, compassion, empathy. These things are things that we should never lose, I feel like, because otherwise we risk losing the very foundation of what our country is built on, our culture is built on. So yeah, keep that in mind. If you'd like to stay connected or see more of the work that we're doing at Allied Voices for Israel, Please feel free to follow us on social media, most social media platforms at Allied Voices for Israel. And you can also feel free to check out our website at www.alliedvoicesforisrael.org to learn about all the programs and workshops that we offer. We have lots of exciting resources that we recently released, so please check them out. And yeah, that's it for today. Thank you again, Ashley.
Thank you.